Okay, so we're going to talk about commerce. We're going to talk about payments and hardware. I am Jared Shannon, as hopefully you all by now either know or have forgotten and now remember again. This is Ruben Delgado. So I'm going to first kind of run through retail payments and kind of an overview setting. Payments is not actually my area. However, through PADSS and a variety of other fun things, I have generally learned it by force. Payment setup, VeriFone, MasterCard, payment customizations, PADSS. We're going to run through all that stuff. And then Ruben's going to come up here and talk about your various peripheral hardening things that have occurred and the fun and mysterious project Laramie. And then we'll have a quick Q&A, and you can finally then head home and be happy and sleep. So let's talk payment setup. Quick and beautiful slides. In operations, there is a payment services page. In this payment services page, you may set up what is out of the box. We, by default, have our test connector in there. You can also easily set up VeriFone or MasterCard. Obviously, this still means you are going to set up your actual payment service. You're still going to have your various merchant ID information, and you'll have to go back and forth with that. Then in your point-of-sale hardware profile, you will be able to utilize said payment service and actually be able to work it across your point-of-sale store, etc., hardware stations, all the fun stuff. So setup, pretty straightforward out of the box. Let's go with VeriFone. So VeriFone today works in 2012 R3 at CU11 and above, Dynamics 365, so for operations and such, and works across three particular devices, the MX925, the 915, and the E355. It is PCI free, so we do not have to worry from a Dynamics 365 for operations perspective about PCI, which is beautiful. Card not present and card present. We don't have to worry about encryption. They are E2E encrypted token. It does have a hosted payment page, so that does mean that you don't have to worry about the PCI from the actual payment perspective. Once again, that hosted payment page, easily callable, easily usable. Accounts receivable and call center, e-commerce, and then all of our various point of sale, including through hardware. Pretty straightforward in that sense. A few further details. They are working on being P2PE certified. They do not yet have it, but it's in the works right now. There is a lovely sign-up URL. This is actually the new URL, by the way. They had a previous URL that is older and was US only, but now they have a new URL for Canada as well. So hopefully, if we have a few folks in that regard. I wish to no end my FAQ URL was a little better, because that's a fun one to remember. But easily enough, you can grab the presentation. We'll be able to pick that up. Two options, STA Classic and STA Enterprise. So sending your transactions to VeriFone Payware, obviously your card present scenarios. Call center and e-commerce, of course, being card not present. All major credit card processors are supported, so no issues in that regard, as opposed to STA Enterprise, where First Data, Vantiv, Chase Payment Tech, that's it. EMV or non-EMV for STA Enterprise. I believe it's not for Classic, if I remember correctly. Okay. Current limitations. Oh, I question already. What's up? It is out of box. So the question was for VeriFone, etc. Well, I'm going to be going over here. Is it actually in the solution already, out of box, or is it something you still have to deploy a connector? The answer is we actually deploy the connector now. We have the rights. So yay for that. That said, obviously any crazy customizations, etc., if you have specific, payment services, obviously there are things that can change that, but out of the box, yes, it's there. Limitations, no support for level 2 and level 3. That's the biggest one. No third-party gift card processing right now either. Obviously, no check processing. Currently only U.S. markets, and again, it's not the P2PE certified yet. That said, coming soon, and hopefully we'll be able to talk to you pretty quick about it. Our other out-of-box solution is MasterCard. 2012 R3CU10 and above, and Dynamics 365 for operations as well. Same concept, PCI free, still the hosted page. The big difference is this is only card not present. There is no card present scenarios that are supported by MasterCard today, which also means no hardware support. Same concepts though, AR and call center, e-commerce, and obviously point of sale as long as you are not doing the hardware for 13 current markets. If you want to know what those 13 markets are, I will direct you in a moment to a different thing. Further details. So, as I mentioned, no support for transactions with a payment device. That's the biggest downside to MasterCard. MasterCard does own its own IP. It is responsible for servicing. So Microsoft does redistribute, but if something's wrong, we pass it on to them. The sign-up's pretty straightforward. The test card URL is pretty straightforward. So feel free to mess with those. Again, out-of-the-box solution. We have full capabilities of actually deploying the connectors as needed. Current limitations, as I said, no payment device. That's the biggest one. Card present scenarios not being supported. It does support level 2 processing, but only with certain payment processors, which I will have to defer to Yabin at this moment to actually talk about. And then no support for level 3 payment card processing. Okay. So let's talk payment customization. And I'll give you this horrible, horrible link. I even tried to shorten the URL, and it still didn't give it to me. So long story short, you can do some Googling / Binging and get the payment SDK URL as well. Obviously, the presentation will be available to you later also. So these are linkable, findable things in the future. And there's a wiki article. That's right. Everybody's excited about the wiki. And so, yes, there is a wiki article, Deploy Payment Connector. You can search for it. You can find it pretty quick and easy. And it, of course, gives you various links and fun information as well, along with a huge variety of SDK sample payment scenarios, which you can also get across some of the links that are provided. These are just some of the scenarios that are showcased in the SDK. So if there are any issues or questions, you can talk to Yavin. Now we get to the fun part as to why I was roped into this. PADSS. So I do all of our PADSS certifications for our solution. It is a lovely, fun few months in a small lab. We are, of course, PCI or PADSS certified. So the PCI Security Standards Council does have listings for Dynamics 365 for operations for 3.2. We are 3.1 certified, and very soon we will be 3.2 certified. Dynamics 2012 R3CU11 is 3.2 certified. Okay. And there's an implementation guide, of course. Anytime you do a certification, you must write up a implementation guide. There was a question very early in the morning about PCI standards. The implementation guide is the way to go. It will specify down to the exact steps of how to be PCI ready through this guide before your audit. Okay? So all that said and done, I am going to hand it over to Ruben, who's going to chat with you about the peripheral hardening and Project Laramie. And then we are probably going to tie in a wrap-up pretty quick here, too. Ruben?
Thanks, Jared. I won't do that again. At least everybody's awake, right? Thanks, Jared, for making payments easier than I've ever thought it was. Okay, so yeah, as Jared mentioned, I'll discuss something called retail peripheral hardening, and kind of our our journey that we've been going on for a few releases now, and cover kind of some of the areas we're trying to address and how we're addressing those things. And then the mysterious project Laramie, and then go to Q&A. So anyone who's dealt with retail peripherals knows it can be a pain, really. So probably last summer, or even before then, we've been trying to address it, and now we've got a lot of executive sponsorship on, like, okay, let's go and make peripherals a lot easier. So the first thing we looked at is customer issues and how can we address those. So for our customers, there haven't always been a lot of resources around, what devices to use, how to set them up, things of that nature. And then there's not consistency across manufacturers. So for the customers, they have to kind of relearn everything every time they change devices. I hit my steps goal. So, and next, there are manufacturer issues. I mean, honestly, like I said, the setup isn't always the same. The quality definitely isn't always the same. And for manufacturers, they've asked, like, how can we get on a certification list and things of that nature? And we haven't had an answer because we don't really want to look as if we're endorsing certain devices. And then just from a sheer number of devices standpoint, we can't test everything internally. I was talking with Dan a few minutes ago, like for one model of receipt printer, you can have USB connection, serial, network, Bluetooth. Then you have different versions of firmware, drivers, things of that nature. So it's really hard to have good coverage just trying to do it ourselves. From a support standpoint, you can imagine when our support folks get, and Don knows, when our support folks get a bug, something's wrong with a device, it's not working. The default is to believe it's an MPOS problem, and that can be the case. It could be an issue with MPOS or hardware station, but when there's a device involved, it's hard to really narrow that down. So what we've seen is with a lot of support cases, especially where someone's bought hundreds of a certain device, the manufacturers have a hard time saying, okay, this is our, something we did, and we have a hard time saying, okay, there's a problem with MPOS, and we have to get their device in house, have a repro, and it's a long drawn out process. The bottom line is it's resource wise, it's really expensive, and like I mentioned, we have to actually have a physical device to perform that testing. So as you see, I'm going along, and I apologize, I didn't realize the screen would be so small, but I kind of have these in different categories. So customer issues have a C, manufacturer issues have an M, and support issues have an S. And I kind of try and correlate those categories with how we're trying to solve these issues. So, and finally, from a product and build standpoint, like I mentioned, testing and troubleshooting is time-consuming, and it's hard in our build environment to have good test coverage when physical devices are required. So this is kind of our main list of issues. These are kind of taking all of the problems, we separated them into these categories, and we said, okay, how are we going to address this? So the first and most obvious thing is documentation. So we realized that we could have better documentation to explain configuration options, setup steps, troubleshooting tips, and devices. If we're not going to, have devices we endorse per se, we can at least be more informative about what we've tested internally. And so, from a customer and a support standpoint, we think that'll help out a lot. Just being able to surface all that information and kind of build that tribal knowledge and give people resources to go access. So, and then there's simplification and enhancement. We know that things aren't super easy to set up sometimes, and we try to make that better. So, like when the modern application MPOS was introduced, we created this thing called the hardware station, and that was because we didn't have good access to local resources on the local machine. And then we took that hardware station, and we gained a ability to communicate with devices through IPC, and kind of things progressed where we started out with a solution we had to find workarounds for, and now we have good workarounds, and we're trying to make things easier out of the box. So some things we've looked at to do to help with simplification and enhancement is like redistributing or linking to supported drivers, providing setup wizards, peripheral auto detection and validation, and health check logging and troubleshooting tools. So I thought those would really help our customers and support as well. And then we realized that from an LCS standpoint, it'd be good to sort of tackle these issues right up front. So we started looking at different ways we could add into the LCS methodologies. So if you create a new product, you actually have guidance as you're going through those steps. And so we're started investigating kind of how can we bake that into the process and make sure people are making decisions up front that they won't regret later. So there's also a QA realm to this whole thing. And this kind of helps everybody. And a lot of it was, okay, let's look at test coverage and say, how can we catch any issues on a build-by-build basis as opposed to every test pass. And our test passes is when we go and get physical devices, install the point-of-sale client, and test all of our different devices. And as you can imagine, it's super resource-intensive because you have to go round up the devices that have been used in development and test since the last test pass, find the drivers, install the drivers. All of you guys know how much fun all of that is. So we tried to make that something we could do on a build-by-build basis, and that would help us, see if there's an issue. And also, as far as sealing the peripherals goes, I'm not talking about that a lot right now, but everybody's familiar with the sealing that's gone on with like CRT. We're taking that to the hardware level as well. So we're introducing hooks and better integration points for the peripherals. No one looks surprised by that, so I'm sure it's been covered previously in the extensibility sessions. And then device certification, we said, okay, what the heck? Let's go and be more proactive and put some skin in the game and see if we can make some tools to help people certify devices or at least make sure they're compatible with our software. So some of the things we're looking at is creating a whitelist. And keep in mind, I'm walking through our process here, our kind of thought process. We looked at pain points and then said, how the heck can we fix these things? And so this is what we're talking about now. So previously, we only tested devices internally. But we're going to make it so people can test on their own and sort of self-certify for compatibility and report those things to us. And that seems to make the most sense as far as removing the bottleneck that we create when we've only got a few people who can test these things, and there's myriad devices and permutations that need to be tested. So, and then from that list of sort of supported devices, we'll publish that out. And everybody can see that. And so execution-wise, how are we doing with all of these sort of areas I just listed with our plan? So documentation-wise, we've done a lot. Pardon. So documentation-wise, I realize you can't read this in the back. Sorry about that. We published a retail peripherals overview. Is everybody aware of that? Have you seen it? Is anybody using it? Okay, check it out. Took a lot of time. Please read it. So what that does, maybe later if we have time, we can actually kind of look at the document real quick too. But that covers all of our supported topologies, all of our different devices that we've tested, and for which topology they've been tested by. Also, kind of we realized that a lot of people haven't always been in retail. It's getting better now. There's more domain knowledge, but it even explains the different sort of communication protocols, like what does OPOS mean? Something you might hear a lot, but what does it really mean? And things of that nature. And then we also released, we have documentation for our retail peripheral simulator. I'll talk about the simulator a little bit more later, but just right away, show of hands, who's used the simulator? Okay. Cool. Uh, Jared, thanks. So if you haven't used that and you're responsible for implementing and testing peripheral devices, check that out. Maybe I'll demo that too, because it looks like not everybody's familiar with it. But that's a really useful tool. In fact, later on I'll show you, kind of give you a tour of that. So more documentation that we have planned. We're looking at device-specific install instructions for certain devices and kind of creating a repository for all of that, or at least good forward links to their documentation. And we want to give you sort of a portal where you can go and figure out how to install a certain device and even find links to those drivers. And then we're also looking at how can we provide better guidance for PC settings. And everybody's run into a certain issue that took them a while to figure out. And if we can sort of crowdsource that knowledge and surface it so people know that, okay, you set your power settings so the USB ports don't go to sleep, and that will help things later on down the road. Jared's nodding again. Same thing for network cards, things of that nature. But first of all, it would be nice if we can crowdsource that kind of thing. So later on, we'll be investigating how we can get everybody's sort of knowledge together in one place. And then we might even introduce a utility that will you could run on your machine, and it would look at all of your different settings on your PC and kind of give you feedback on, is there something you need to change? Are there settings that need to be updated so you won't run into issues later? So we're also adding simplification and enhancement. We've been making setup easier. Our progress might not always be that obvious, but we're always looking at ways that we can kind of make it dead simple. So we're working on mostly performing validation in the back office. So someone can set up their hardware profile and assign it to a hardware station. And we'll check to make sure, for example, if you have a shared hardware station, we'll check and say, okay, you should only have a cash drawer, receipt printer, and payment terminal assigned to that shared hardware station. Because conceptually, if people are walking around with a tablet and just going somewhere to tender a transaction, you probably don't need a line display there. You probably don't need a standalone MSR or barcode scanner. Those are on the device side. They're with the person carrying the tablet. And also, it's really hard to manage who has ownership of that device at what time if everybody's sharing a certain hardware station. So we're adding validation to make sure you don't get in those sort of scenarios. Yeah, I've heard that if there's an issue there, I'm not sure what it is. The question was, can you run an MPOS on the same machine as a hardware station? And there are a few KBs that were issued to kind of fix some issues with it, but limitation-wise, that shouldn't be a problem, and it's not something we impose. So if there is an issue, we need to know about it. Yeah, there were early on there were problems with loopback, and kind of as we've been going through the modern app journey, there have been some things we had to address. Okay. They run it all on a Surface.
And just real quick, specifically, I'll try to stay away. Specifically, MPOS IPC. I'm really wondering what both on there now. It's an it was.
You had to change a registry setting to enable loopback. I don't think that's the case anymore, but I can double check. And I could easily think of a scenario where you have a fixed point of sale where someone's there all the time doing transactions, and maybe someone with a tablet needs to walk up and tender a transaction. So yeah, so I could see that being needed. Okay, so also part of our execution is we created a retail point of sale simulator. I'll talk more about that later. That's Project Laramie, so won't get too into it. There's a whole section for it, but that CTP is pending for that, and the CTP is mostly geared at hardware manufacturers or peripheral manufacturers, and we'll GA later this spring. This thing will, it needs to ship out of band because our manufacturing partners don't have access to LCS, and they're not AX folks, and we explicitly created it for that purpose. So we'll talk more about that later, but it's basically to test device compatibility without having to deploy MPOS. So what we test with that utility will then feed into our LCS methodologies. And I mentioned we need to, up front, let people know what's going to work with your specific deployment. So we're adding a step in the LCS methodology. So when you create a project, there's a step in there to say, okay, there's like a questionnaire that says, what peripherals are you using? And you'll go through and select like, okay, I have mobile or fixed point of sale. It's OS is Windows, obviously, or there are other options there. But basically, you give really specific details about what you envision for your point of sale. And then we'll surface a list that says, okay, here are all the devices that will work for that. So hopefully that demystifies a lot of what's going on, because now you know what's been tested, and for your specific environment, what you can use. And you get multiple topologies per project. So like if you have fixed point of sale and mobile point of sale, you'll be able to model both of those out in LCS and have some good guidance there. Yeah. Sorry, what? Yeah. Oh, can you order it through here? That's a good revenue stream. That's awesome. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Right. Yeah, you can do that, and this tool will also be surfaced. So, kind of, I talk about this later, but right now in LCS, we don't know what vertical this project is for. There's not that sort of a questionnaire for a project. So everybody will be able to use this tool. The thing is, for new projects, they'll see it in the methodology. We can't retroactively change old methodologies, but the tool will be available for everyone to use within LCS. That's something we're working on. So we're really eager to get this in the hands of some of our manufacturing peripheral partners. So we just got a draft of the SLT today from our LCA, and so maybe as soon as tomorrow we'll be able to actually provide this to our manufacturing partners. So around sort of more QA enhancements, execution-wise, what have we done? We've made a ton of progress here. So we shipped our peripheral simulator last fall. I check it out. It's almost as good as the peripherals overview documentation, but I'll show that later. We've added automation in our build, so we've guessed it could be about 5 days of work that we can now perform as part of every build that used to had to be done manually, and that was just to test all of our different devices. So we did that using the peripheral simulator. We actually took the tool and we made it so you could test virtual devices with our point of sale, and then we took that tool and added it to our build environment. So we've got E2E tests running for every build. And then I mentioned earlier that we're sealing the peripherals right now. So from a quality standpoint, that'll make lives easier. I actually thought people would freak out about that, but I've heard anecdotal evidence that some people are like, no, that's the way to go. So from a partner standpoint, as I mentioned, we should be able to get this tool in our manufacturing partners' hands, like from a preview standpoint, as early as next week. And the intention is when we have like the methodology in LCS, we want to have primed that list of peripheral devices, so you don't just go there and it's empty. So we are working with some hardware manufacturers to at least provide early feedback now, and later have them involved fully in the testing. So general availability for that tool, as I mentioned, it'll be, actually this says post VNext. I thought I fixed that. It'll be later this spring when we actually have general availability, and you'll see it in Dynamics 365 for operations. You can download the tool from in there, but the GEA is more geared toward manufacturers, so we can start to reach out and give them the tool and have them start testing. So, and also from a partner engagement standpoint, we showed this tool to the Windows team and some of the people who work in Windows Embedded and UWP, and they were just stoked. They were so happy to see something like this. It is mainly for the peripheral simulator, but what they did is they're like, okay, we're adding, in case you didn't know, Windows is adding basically out-of-the-box support for line display. They, about a year ago, they added out-of-the-box support for cash drawer and receipt printer. And well, actually, that was last fall. And then a year before that, they added out-of-the-box support for barcode and MSR. So those devices, they can function as a native HID device for Windows. And what that means is, you might think they've always been HID, but previously you plugged them in and Windows would recognize the device as an HID device of type, Magtech, for example. Now people can plug those devices in, and they're recognized as an HID device of type MSR. So from an operating system standpoint, that's pretty cool. We've come a long way in that regard. So customer engagement-wise, we, as I mentioned, I kind of talked about a lot of this already. So we're adding this peripheral compatibility questionnaire to LCS. That'll be used for existing products. Yeah, I already kind of stole my own thunder on this slide. But we're also working with LCS to kind of refine their project methodologies to make them more vertical specific. And we're making sure they get that feedback and allowing us to kind of make things more clear. If you're a retailer and you go into LCS, you see some things that are specific to what you need. Okay, so for Project Laramie, as I mentioned, retail peripherals have traditionally been, difficult just because there are so many devices. You need physical machines for testing. The drivers are all over the place quality-wise, and then you have to have physical devices. So people have asked for a long time for a list of certified devices, and we just haven't been able to provide that. So I redid these slides when I saw how small the screen is, so people can read this. So that's what Project Laramie is. It's this utility we can give to people to test an actual physical device, and you don't have to go update your hardware profile, sync the changes down to your MPOS, close a shift, relaunch MPOS, assuming you already have MPOS deployed. We make it super easy, and I'll kind of show you how that works. So just kind of background-wise, so if you think about like OPOS, I'm not sure if everybody's familiar with the OPOS standard, but real quick, so we have our retail business logic, and we communicate with a common control object, and that's published by Monroe Consulting Services, and this is commonly known as OPOS Common Controls. And when you hear OPOS, it's just an implementation of the UPOS protocol established by NRF, and UPOS is a communication protocol for Windows, so not super exciting background-wise, but this kind of helps show where the issues are. And then a service object or a driver is provided by our device manufacturers, and that communicates with the retail peripheral device. So there's kind of a lot of areas along the way where things can go wrong there. And Dan's shaking his head. He's been there. So we first created the retail peripheral simulator. And what this did is it kind of gave us a control group. And we said, okay, now we can know that we have sort of our own mocked-up retail peripherals. And we can test against those and help to eliminate if it's an issue with the device driver or the peripheral simulator. So that was fine and dandy. It really helped us with our build process. As I mentioned, we integrated that into our build, so that got us quite a ways. But there was still a need to be able to simulate the point of sale, and so we've built that. And what this does is it takes all of the expertise as far as Dynamics 365 operations, MPOS, hardware station deployment, all that stuff, takes out the need to have access to LCS or an environment, and it allows you to just simply deploy an executable, basically, and you can test devices. And you see here, you can kind of imagine, you might have the point of sale simulator and the peripheral simulator, and it's like all a virtual world. And I'll use that to demonstrate kind of how the POS simulator works. So doing this, this peripheral simulator uses our same business logic as the point of sale, and so we can very easily determine if a device is going to work or not, if it's compatible with the point of sale. And so as part of this, we'll list those devices on a public web page. You can imagine, I mentioned LCS. We'll have an LCS questionnaire. That same list of compatible devices will be surfaced in a public-facing web page. And if you've been to like roadmap.dynamics.com, you can filter by different products and things of that nature. It'll be this very similar web page. We'll use the same style guides and everything like that. You can filter by device and set up and see what's been tested there. And that's mostly for the manufacturers, so they can go in and say, okay, we did all this work. Can we see it? Can we see our device listed? Most people will probably get that information from LCS, hopefully, if it's part of an actual implementation. And then there's this part. Only devices on the compatible peripherals list will be supported. So there's another thing that I wondered how that would land, but initially, anecdotally, I've heard that people are into that because it kind of gives us a certain degree of confidence that things will work. And if they're not on the list, we'll have a tough time supporting them because we've put so much effort into making sure that we've given people, good information about what's been tested already. So as I mentioned, this puts the compatibility testing in the hands of peripheral manufacturers. Brian? I personally won't disallow it. So the terms of the SLT define who's a customer, and it says that partners can deploy this. You'll have to read the SLT for yourself, but it kind of says like a partner can deploy this for a customer or someone who's using or looking at Dynamics 365. And also in the license terms, you don't have to have a Dynamics 365 subscription to use the tool. And there's no access code or anything, so once this thing's out there, you'll use it however you use it. But okay. So as I mentioned, this puts the testing in the hands of the manufacturers. So they've got, everybody can test their devices, and if we kind of share the wealth on that sort of tax we take from testing devices, we'll be able to make that list grow pretty quickly too. And just like at NRF, I was talking to a lot of peripheral manufacturers about this whole effort, and some people kind of their feedback or felt like they're saying, why would I do that? But for us to support the devices, they have to do it. So hopefully we can kind of spread the word, and I'm going to need your help for that too, because everybody has the device they're looking at or has their own relationships. So as we go forward and we hit general availability with this Project Laramie, I'm going to ask you to have manufacturers contact this alias if they want to be on the compatibility list. And the thing is, we're trying to make it really easy for them to go and do this. Like, the tool's dead simple to install. It's dead simple to use. And that's why we want participation. We're doing everything we can to make sure it's easy for people to go on here and perform their tests. So those manufacturers, after they get the invite to be part of the program, we'll use Connect to manage that manufacturer participation. So we'll send out invites. That's how they get the bits. That's how we'll refresh the bits. And the challenge there is, as I mentioned earlier, they don't have access to LCS or anything like that. So good thing we have this Connect portal to kind of administer that whole program. And then they'll also submit their test results through LCS. So setup-wise, you need the common control objects, as I mentioned, that sort of little piece there. That makes everything work, and we don't make it, and we don't redistribute it. So go to monroecs.com. You need to install the common control objects. I basically do it before you do anything. You just go through, use the default settings, and the current version is 1.14, and that's what we recommend, is using the most current version. So here, to find this POS simulator, when we actually ship it as part of operations, it's on the hardware profile. And it's just here in this little download link. Click download, and you can download the utility. And then you just double-click the executable, and it's really easy to install. So I don't even show any steps for that. But and this will probably be more useful later on when you're using it, if you want to go back and reference this setup. But so just log into point of sale in non-drawer mode, and then select use this if you're using demo data, use this select hardware station operation down there. And you need to turn on your hardware station. If you're using MPOS as a modern app, you can use the built-in hardware station, and it's really easy. You just click 2 buttons, and it should work just fine. And that's included in demo data. And also in demo data, you don't even have to map to. Let me go. Well, I'll show you in setup. But we have a virtual peripherals hardware profile, and this makes everything work with at least for our POS simulator. So if you're using the utility for that, be sure you're mapped to that hardware profile. So when you log into point of sale, select non-drawer mode, and then go turn on your hardware station, and then log back out, log in, and select create a new shift. And here you'll be presented with your cache drawers that are set up as simulated cache drawers for the mock point of sale peripherals, and that's kind of the setup for POS simulator. And now I'll show you what that looks like. Okay, so here's my utility here. And when I launch it, it says, you can see it says use virtual peripherals or use the POS simulator. So I'll start with virtual peripherals since it didn't seem like everybody was familiar with that. So here for virtual peripherals, what this is it's basically a virtualized set of point of sale peripherals. So we've got here our line display, cache drawers, close your cache drawer, MSR, pin pad, printer, scale, signature capture pad, and barcode scanner. And what this does is I'll just launch the point of sale so you can see it here. So while that's launching, the way this works is you set it up as basically when you install the peripheral simulator, we set all of the basically the drivers or service objects that we've created. We install all of those for you, and there's good documentation on this. But basically, if you use our hardware profile, the virtual peripheral hardware profile, you don't have to do anything really. So the line display will obviously show everything that's going on that should go on a normal line display. Cache drawer opens and closes depending on which cache drawer you're using. For MSR, so what this does is it can work as an OPOS MSR or as a keyboard wedge. And when it's working as keyboard wedge, we have a delay there, so you can change focus to point of sale. So the data you're trying to swipe goes to the right place. And you can imagine there's a lot of different card types, a lot of things you might need to test. So here I can modify an existing card or create a new one. So let's say I came out with like a new gift card format or something like that. I can specify that information for that gift card and even provide a expiration information. Is that a question? Mm-hmm. For this, it's probably against the law in a lot of places. So depending on your requirements, you could specify expiration. And if I save that card now, when I go into the point of sale, I could actually use that card. We'll do something else just kind of for demonstration's sake. So let's say I want to test like a loyalty scan for a customer. I've got one set up here already for my barcode scan. So I can scan this barcode. You see here, point of sale is receiving the scan information. I found Mara Gentry. So it should have added her to the transaction directly. I'm not sure why that didn't happen, but since I'm demoing it, I kind of guess that can happen. But so here's Mara Gentry. So we simulated a barcode scan. She's added to the transaction. Maybe Mara wants to buy some things. For example, we'll scan this barcode. This is just for a generic suit variant, and it has me pick the size, color, and style, and that is added to the transaction. So you can model all this out kind of without having to deploy anything. And the cool thing is you can virtualize this. So for us, you can test this on a VM. You don't have to have a physical box to do all of this. Yep. Yep. So let's say you've got your own UPC code or whatever. I just, can provide the number, specify code, and say this is a new item. And then this could generate that barcode. And you see we have the carousel here, so you can kind of scroll through things like here's my customer. This is actually a loyalty card. So I can scan this one, and it's going to say, hey, you already have a customer, I think. Oh, no, okay. I guess it's for a sneaker. It's mislabeled here. Or at least it found sneaker. This data set might not have whatever this 000160 is. But it acts just like if you're scanning data into the point of sale. Yep. For QR codes in here? Not at the moment, but that's, we build this based on, kind of what we think people need or what we hear they need. So that's, take that feedback. And also, is everybody familiar with user voice? Fun? User voice? User voice is, okay, we know about user voice. Everybody's just asleep by now. Okay. I'll assume you know what it is. But yeah, give us your feedback through user voice for things like this as well. And that really helps us. So, okay, back to our transaction here. So Mara's, finished with the shopping, and we can tender the transaction. So I'll pay cash here. And let's say she pays $100. I can look here, check out my receipt from that transaction, including gift card. So, what's that? Yep, the logo's in there. So this is exactly what would print on the printer itself. So okay, so there's that. Then I want to go to my next transaction, and let's say I want to add another product. So I'll just add one manually here. It says this operation can't be performed while your cash drawer is open. So you could use this for training too, actually. So I'll go and close my cash drawer, and now I can go take off and keep doing my transactions. So everything should work. It works just like anything in the point of sale, including the scanner, things of that nature. So you can model a lot of that stuff out. I'll go into the POS simulator now. There are questions about the peripheral simulator? Okay. Okay, so you can picture, as I've said probably 100 times now, a manufacturer is primarily going to be using this. And so what they would do is they would take their own device and install the drivers and plug it into a machine, and then install this simulator. And what they would do is go in here and say, okay, I want to test my OPOS line display, for example. We look in the registry and see what OPOS devices have been set up on that machine, and they can select whatever's present. So I'll say mock OPOS line display, and I'll kind of mention this now. So the idea is to have them drive a lot of this and provide this data. So you can see here we specify device model, connection type you're using, firmware version, driver download link. All of that stuff is important. So I'll save my device here. And we also get more information from the manufacturer. So you can see here, if you can see, it's testing double byte characters to make sure those are supported. But we take the manufacturer name, website, support email, all of that stuff. And when they go and perform their tests, like they'll perform you can perform a one-off test, like I can lock my line display text on my line display, clear the text, and release the line display. So it's all of those functions that you do from an OPOS standpoint. Or I can have this self-test performed. And what they'll be instructed to do is plug in their device, clear this log, perform the self-test. We go through a series of tests here, and you can't see it, but we send a whole bunch of events to this device, kind of standard events that they would encounter at runtime with the point of sale. And we produce a log that says, if this test passes or not. And then they can go and export this log and send it to us. And the export won't function unless you've filled out all of the manufacturer details and device information. But let's call this test 1. This is kind of manual. Later on, hopefully we can have them upload this or do something a little bit better, but we're just trying to ship this thing. So here's what the log file looks like. So you can see it's got all the manufacturer information, website, and all of that will be surfaced with the device compatibility information. So if someone goes in and they perform this, go through the questionnaire in LCS, they have a link to the driver download and support for the manufacturer, and all that information is right there. So kind of same thing goes for all of these devices. I can open my cash drawer and close it and check drawer status. The cash drawer is a pretty dumb device, so not a lot of excitement there. MSR, same thing. I can open and claim my device or perform a self-test. So where you need something to be performed on the device itself, we tell them we're waiting for you to swipe the card. So you swipe the card, and we display the track data here. You can make sure everything looks okay, and the log can then be exported for us to show online. PinPad requires the use of our payment connector. So I don't have this set up right now, but you'll be able to test a PinPad. And also in the future, we're adding support for payment terminal. So basically, this POS simulator just exercises our same APIs that we use in the payment SDK. So the idea is that people can go in and set up their payment device and their drivers and test it with MPOS without having to go and deploy all of our stuff. So printer-wise, same thing. We have the self-test capabilities. I'm trying to use my XPS printer. That's under development, Windows printer testing. But so I'll just change this to my OPOS printer. There we go. So I can perform my self-test. We send a bunch of print commands to the printer. These tests that we run, when I press this button, we go and do a bunch of things on the device that are kind of standard with how our point of sale would interact with the device. We'll be updating those tests based on any kind of feedback we get or issues we have to resolve, things we might find out are common among devices. Also in the future, we're adding scenarios where printer might be fine on its own, same with cash drawer and line display, but when they're all used at the same time, we've seen problems with drivers where there might be access violations or things of that nature. So we'll just be developing sort of the tests that go on as we go. Yeah. There's not a reason why we won't add it. Basically what we're trying to do is support everything that MPOS doesn't do. So right now we're hitting Windows right now is being implemented, right, Param? There's Param in the back is the engineer responsible for all this. So yeah, and also in our hardware profile, we list those options for everything anyway. So in here, we're working on only showing options that are actually implemented. So hopefully we can make those changes in the hardware profile as well. So scale, same thing. Signature capture, just kind of fun to look at. So I'll do the self-test. It's waiting for the customer to sign here. I can sign on my signature capture device. You can see how that signature would be displayed in the point of sale. Make sure everything looks okay there. Same with the barcode scanner. It works as you could imagine. So I don't have a barcode scanner configured, but basically the data comes in and we can view it, things of that nature. So that's a lot of the rundown. Kind of the last thing I haven't mentioned is, MPOS supports IPC connection to hardware station and also IIS hardware station connection. So within our compatibility tests, we'll have that distinction. So we know if something's been tested for IPC versus IIS, and there can be differences there. So runtime would test our IPC code paths the same way MPOS connects to devices using the built-in hardware station. And the Win32 is sort of the direct I/O connection with the device that you'd see like if you had an IIS hardware station deployed. So questions about any of this right now? Yep. Yeah, so, whoops. Let me bring up my presentation here. Yeah, Mark. So anyway, yeah, so we're adding, like for payment terminal support, if you have an implementation for your payment terminal that works with MPOS and our hardware station, then the intention is to support it here, exact same. So yeah, right now we're working on adding network device support and Windows printer support. and also payment terminal support. So we're adding, building the UI for that and kind of figuring out which APIs we need to test. So yeah, that's all coming along. I just can't show it now because it's not in our main build. Yep. So yeah, here we go. So as I mentioned, we're adding payment terminal, Windows support, network devices, telemetry, and diagnostics, so we can see kind of how people are using this thing. We won't be getting like personal information necessarily, but we want to be able to know, like, if no one's even looking at line display, it gives us some evidence about kind of where we need to focus our efforts. As I mentioned, we're working on PC hardware guidance too. If not a document, or if not a utility that tells you what you need to change on your machine, at least a document that we can kind of create with your help. And yeah, we're looking at crowdsourcing for that. So, question? Mm-hmm. At least in here, no. So not in operations. Yeah. So we had to use the same setup for those, and what we're doing, like for network doesn't have all the same setup as OPOS devices, so we're making that contextual as well. So we'll end up changing it. So if you select gift card, maybe we say expiration's optional or something like that. But I know people can get in trouble for certain expiration-related things for gift card. Yeah, that shouldn't be intended as a roadmap thing for operations. Okay. More questions? Yep. So we'll be refreshing the bits a lot, and if we do like a major revision of the common control objects, that's a good idea. We should kind of at least have that in version notes, or give some kind of warning. So yeah, that's good feedback. The good thing is there hasn't been a lot of changes with the common control objects lately. Like 8 years ago, a change of a version could break everything, but it's getting pretty stable now. I guess since we're doing questions, we should bring Jared up here too, because there are probably some payment questions. So we've got 15 minutes, so it can be quiet, or we can have a good talk.
And I didn't squeal, so all right. Whole lot of nothing. Everybody's just dead tired. That's what it boils down to. I'm sorry, check processing for what? Oh, check franking. I have honestly no clue. The short answer, I believe, is no, but I couldn't give you any details around that. If Yabin wants to jump in later, then we can give you an answer. Yeah. So I'll try to follow up around it, but I'm pretty sure the answer is no, and it's not in the roadmap. A lot of stretching. Okay. When GiveX support will be in the payment connector. I did not put that in the timeline, and I don't think it is something on our roadmap either, is it?
So there was a KB released for gift card just recently, and I thought that added support for gift card. We should talk to Yabin.
Yeah, we'll have to talk to Yabin, because there's some work being done in both 2012 and AX7, and I'm not sure which one's first. So yeah. CU12, you said?
Yeah.
Plus?
Yeah.
Okay.
So that's out there. The reason I know that's out there is because a support engineer was IMing with me earlier, telling me what happened to printing when I installed this KB. So maybe give it a day or two, because I know there's at least one issue with it.
Oh, okay. Yeah, Jeff can talk about screen layouts.
Jeff, you want to bring it home?
Love me some Jeff.